Welcome back to Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation. I'm Jenny Rudolph, an organizational behavior scholar interested in all the things that happen behind the scenes to trigger us, enable us, what powers our cognitive routines, our emotional reactions, and how do we work with those with empathy, and how do we master those with kindness so that we can interact with ourselves and other people even better. So today we're going to be talking about the challenge of asking real questions. Asking real questions can feel really risky. I've learned this over the last 15 years, working with health professions, leaders, and educators who often really like to ask questions like, wouldn't it have been better to give the epinephrine earlier? Or perhaps you've heard something like this from your spouse. Hey, honey, did it occur to you to empty the dishwasher? So when I encounter questions like this in my leadership coaching work or my instructor training work, and I hear people say questions like, wouldn't it have been better to give the epinephrine earlier? Or did it occur to you to have a family meeting? I often say something to them like, hey, I'm inferring from what you're saying that you think it would have been good to give the epinephrine earlier, or I'm inferring from what I'm hearing that you think it would have been good to have a family meeting. And I'm perplexed as to why you didn't just tell the other person what you thought. And I usually hear something like, well, it's better if they come to the answer themselves. And I certainly agree that each of us discovering what is happening in our own thoughts and our own feelings is incredibly valuable. But when you phrase a question like, wouldn't it have been better to dot, 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 what you're really saying there is read my mind, please, and agree with me. It's not really an invitation to understand their thinking. And so, why is that so hard for us to get genuinely curious about what's going on with the other person? So, to help us with this domain of why asking questions is so risky, our readiness goal today is we're hoping that by the end of the episode, you'll be ready to tolerate not knowing long enough to ask a real open ended question that you don't know the answer to. And I'm saying it with such emphasis because I can tell you, I and many of the other humans really struggle with that. So let's talk a little bit about the not knowing zone. As it turns out, a lot of us are wired for certainty. We want to ask questions that close the loop, not open the loop. And the problem is that when we ask close ended questions, such as, do you think it's a good idea to XYZ? That is a yes no question. And it's really much, much more difficult to tolerate the moment of asking, I'm curious to know what you were thinking about, dot, 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 or how might you think about, dot, 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 because we do not know what the other person is going to share. It's really easy to stick to answers that you already have in your own mind. And when you feel that kind of flutter of agitation as you move into the space where you might be asking a question like, hey, I heard you say it's really important to share empathy with a family member who's struggling. And then I say, what does that look like? What does empathy look like in that context? I don't know what they're going to say. And so I have to build that muscle of tolerating hearing an answer about what empathy looks like to them that might be very different from me, and I might even disagree with. So, one of the things that's really interested me for many years is this idea that also propels us to ask fake questions. And that is that we want to hide our judgment. We actually have a point of view about what the other person's doing, but we don't want them to become defensive. And so I've written about that as non judgmental, fake non judgmental questions. My colleague Mary Fay helped clarify what we really mean by that by calling it hidden judgment questions. And the tricky thing there is we're kind of performing curiosity by putting our point of view into a question. I often talk about it as, hey, that's a advocacy disguised as an inquiry, by which I mean it's my point of view disguised as a question. And I am so allergic to this because it always lands on me when people do this to me as so manipulative. I think their hearts are pure. I think they genuinely do want to know something about what I'm thinking, or they're hoping to very gently lead me to what they're thinking. So I don't think their intention is to manipulate me, but it sure as heck lands on me that way. And I have noticed as I've worked again with many leaders and many educators that the people in conversation with them don't appreciate being led. So I want to talk about one other trap that I think hinders us from getting truly curious and asking real questions. And that is for educators and for people who have been lifelong learners and successful at it, we tend to all have experienced something called test activated learning. So if you're an awesome A+ student, you probably tested yourself before every quiz or every test. If you're an older person like me, you used a quaint thing called a flashcard, an actual piece of paper. Others of you might have used Quizlet. Others of you use other app-based things to quiz yourself. But when you do that, you recall things and it helps you memorize them, and that's fantastic. So the problem is when you ask a test question in the context of having committed or implied to the other person that you actually want to know what they think, because a test question is about usually what you think and what is the canonical or categorical or accepted answer on something. You can do that in a good way. I'll talk about that in another podcast. But beware of asking test questions when you really mean to be curious.
Can I say that another way, Jenny?
Yeah, please.
A test activated question has a correct answer. The question, what was going on for you there when I saw you do X, and I'm thinking why it was happening, has no correct answer. The answer is whatever was going on for them there.
Thank you, James. And I think James, our producer, is making the awesome point that I didn't make as well as you did, James, which is when you ask somebody a question that has a correct answer, you're in one relationship with them. And when you ask them a question that only they know the answer to, or there could be a variety of emergent answers for them, you're establishing a connection and a relationship with them that's quite different. So I'd like to pivot now to talk about how do we ask those risky open-ended questions? How do we get ourselves into that space? And one of the themes of Curious Now is that life's reps, life's repetitions are the ways that we can get better. And for me, asking genuine open-ended questions has been something I've really had to work at, like going to the gym or like practicing musical scales, because all the things that we are all wired to do, look for closure, ask yes, no questions, try to steer the conversation in a way that makes me feel comfortable and in control. I suffer from all those maladies just like all the rest of us. So, one of the ways we can build the curiosity muscle is by focusing on asking open ended questions in sort of safe, modest contexts. So, for example, if somebody says, I think X, Y, or Z, a very simple open ended question to practice is to say, can you tell me more? What are some examples of X, Y, or Z? Can you help me understand? So, just going after or digging on what somebody else has already given you is a very safe and on track way to practice those open ended questions. In addition to practicing repetitions of asking open ended questions, I found that for myself, there's another really important internal reset, and that is moving toward a relationship of empathy, acceptance, and curiosity about the other person. When I'm asking a question like, wouldn't it have been better to? My relationship to that person is as a guide or a teacher or someone who's at that moment trying to change them. In the worst forms of fake Socratic questioning, or as we call it in the United States, pimping, where I'm trying to essentially use a series of questions to box you in and prove to you what you don't know. Inquiry in that case is more like interrogation. And what we want to do here is move away from knowing and controlling to an internal state of not knowing, finding out, and being emergent in the moment or allowing emergence in the moment. And good news, that doesn't have to go on for more than 1 minute. That could go on for 90 seconds. And you can still reset yourself and find out a lot there. What I've had to do in those situations is exercise some courage. And it's not just intellectual courage, though that's part of it, which is like, hey, I got to not know here and I got to find out. That's part of it. But the other part is it's kind of relational courage. I have to give up unilateral control in the moment. I have to allow for some co creation of the next direction we're going to go in. So, the last thing I'd like to say about building the skill of asking real questions is I think it's incredibly helpful if each one of us can find a metaphor or a motivating practice that makes this easier. And the one that I stumbled onto as a PhD student I was being taught about something called the ethnographic interview in my qualitative research methods class. And we had to read a book by an ethnographer named James Spradley. And what I learned about the ethnographic interview is ethnographers, a form of anthropologist, aren't just interested in like people who are totally different from themselves and live in foreign countries. But you can get curious about anyone, even someone quite near you. What is the structure of how they think? And they use the word semantic structures. And that your job as an ethnographic interview is to find out what do they think, how do those thoughts fit together, et cetera. And I was captivated by James Bradley's study of what he called cocktail waitresses that he did in the 1970s. We might use a different word right now. And he interviewed them about what were all the different kind of customers. And once he found out that there were different kind of customers, what were the attributes of those different customers? And what were the practices of those different customers according to the wait staff? And what was so enabling for me about that is I was like, hey, I can sort of still be in a little bit of control while being curious. I can be driving toward understanding the structure of what somebody's thinking. And I guess, even though I enjoy those moments of being kind of improvisational, I do like to know kind of where I'm going. So I move back and forth between having kind of a musical chart or jazz chart of where I'm going and then allowing things to emerge. So I'm hoping each of you might be able to find something like the ethnographic interview. I know I'm a total nerd. That's what I think of. You might think of something else that helps you get to a place of wanting to find out what someone else is thinking structurally. So, I'd like to talk about our workout of the week as we move toward the end of this episode about asking good open ended questions. In our flow, we talk about a preview statement, an observation, a point of view statement, and then an I wonder statement. And that's what we've been talking about today. Your workout of the week is ask one truly open ended curious question a day, one you don't already know the answer to. I'm hoping you're going to find this as incredibly rewarding as I have. I've read that when you get a surprising answer, it actually can trigger a little bit of a dopamine surge. And I know that sometimes when I ask a question, the moment of uncertainty is kind of cool, almost like, rappelling off a cliff or bungee jumping or something. And then I get a cool answer. And so if I can ingrain that cycle of insecurity, uncertainty, followed by surprise, and like it, I can kind of teach myself to be addicted to open ended questions. So, once again, our workout of the week is ask one truly open ended question a day, one you don't know the answer to. Love to hear how this is going for you. Please feel free to email me at curiousnow@harvardmedsim.org or talk to me on LinkedIn.